Now, Deputy Minister of Higher Education and Training, Mr. Manamela, joins us in studio. Mr. Manamela, welcome to ANN7.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Perhaps to start at the very beginning, state of readiness. I mean, there's been talks of free education. We heard that announcement last year, but now there's also calls for students to come to the gates, those that haven't registered. So talk us through the state of readiness of your department.
Well, I mean, firstly, the department has been working with universities and TVET colleges to prepare them for the possibilities of the recommendations that comes from the Hare Commission and the pronouncements by the president, and working on the different scenarios and all of that. What I must emphasize is that for the last 3 to 4 years, the reopening of universities and TVET colleges have been set up as part of a system that is foolproof, that has avoided casualties. If we recall at the University of Johannesburg some 3-4 years ago, where people walked in, long queues, heat and all of that. So the system is in such a way that it is intended to avoid all of those. So we are ready. We are meeting later today with university vice chancellors. Tomorrow we are meeting with principals of TVET colleges to ensure that all systems are in place. But what I also want to emphasize is that the majority of students who were doing grade 12 last year have applied online. Most of those have been granted spaces in universities and TVET colleges. Most of those have been given bursaries or offers of financial support by the NSFAS. Most of those are aware of their situation, whether they'll be studying or not. And secondly, on Friday, we launched the catch system, whose intention is to clear students who either did not apply or were rejected by specific universities and TVET colleges for specific programs. That system, by the end of Friday, had 4,000 students already being processed, and most of those, were being allocated to spaces available in universities. We've had this morning the Tshwane University of Technology indicating that they have some spaces available, and I'm certain that some universities and TVET colleges would have spaces available. What we want to encourage is students to use systems that the department and universities and TVET colleges have set up. If you walk in, it will not help you in any way. We have the catch system, which is foolproof, which has been working for the last 3 to 4 years, whose intention is to avoid chaotic registration processes on campus. So we really want to encourage students to use that system because it works.
Now, this catch system, it applies for all 26 universities.
It applies for all 26 universities. It applies for all TVET colleges. It also will allocate learners to learnerships and to artisans. It will also give them information around available, private universities and TVET colleges, and if there are spaces there or not. So essentially, it has a sense of how many spaces are available where, for which programs, and all of that. And I want to encourage students to have confidence in this system because it has been working for a couple of years now.
Now, for those that are not particularly familiar with technology and would still prefer, or maybe coming from a rural background, would still prefer to walk in, you're saying, contrary to popular belief or what was done before, you cannot perhaps, in what is considered to be a predominantly black university, go to VAL and just walk in. You cannot do that.
Look, inevitably, and this has been happening for the last couple of years, there were some students who would move from the countryside, from the rural areas into the city, and they would go to whatever university that they would want to go to, or TVET college, and present themselves. Those cases were very few in the past. In those cases, people were assisted. They will have to show that they had registered or tried to register with the institution. They'll have to show that they are I mean, they duly qualify to come and study in that institution. But I think what we really want to discourage is a situation wherein students want to, present themselves. In our engagement later today and tomorrow with the different students' organizations, our emphasis will be for us to work together to ensure that there is a smooth registration process. We do not think that it is helpful to encourage students to go and flock outside university or TVET gates. And what I also want to implore to parents in particular is that we have seen what happened in the past where students were encouraged to flock at institutions of learning. And although most universities have indicated and TVET colleges have indicated that they are prepared for any eventuality, we really want to discourage parents from encouraging their kids to go to, to walk in and to present themselves in those institutions. Please use the systems that are available, which have been set up, which has been foolproof, which will help students to study in this academic year.
Now, Mr. Manamela, you go on to emphasize systems. Age-old systems, they're there and we need to utilize them, but we seem to be living in a radical era. Because you'd remember that last year there was that announcement on free education. It was a radical move. We had the likes of the EFF now going on to respond radically to that announcement by saying that you've got people, if we're going to interrogate their message, they said you've got students or people that went on to become petrol attendants. They didn't know they would ever possibly go to university again. It became free. They wouldn't have applied in June as most people would do last year. And here they want to go back to school. What happens if we've got radical announcements and many say we need to respond radically?
Look, whoever that qualifies to study in a university or in a TVET college and they've not applied on time last year, the catch system is there. The catch system has been designed. I'm not talking about a system that has been there in 1964. I'm talking about a system that was put in place in order to ensure that it allocates students to the different spaces available in universities. Use that particular system. You may be a petrol attendant somewhere. You may be excited by the fact that the president says there is going to be access to, fee-free education available. If you believe that you qualify, please apply through the catch system, and through that system, we will allocate you to spaces that are available.
And then to that announcement itself, when we talk about the numbers, I mean, it seems to have raised a lot of confusion, particularly if we talk about the Hare Commission report itself. Contrary to popular belief, it's that you guys disregarded it in its entirety. But then there's belief now, at least we know, that there are certain parts of the Hare Commission that you have gone on to implement. Can you just talk us through some of the considerations on that report that you went on to consider?
Firstly, the Hare Commission was a commission that was set up by the president. Commissions are set up in history, and the role of commissions is to provide recommendations. Those recommendations can be accepted or can be rejected. That's the first point. And the second point is that over and above the Hare Commission, there has been work that the department and government and the ruling party have been doing to look into the prospect of offering fee-free higher education. Thirdly, it is absolutely untrue that the president in his announcement completely disregarded the recommendations of the Hare Commission. What in fact the president did was to consider what is it that will be workable for government, affordable for government, but also what is in the interest of the country with respect to what is contained in the Hare Commission report. And I want to lift, for instance, one recommendation from the Hare Commission, which says provide fee-free TVET at all levels and pay all costs. That the president has made a pronouncement on. But, for instance, the Hare Commission was making a recommendation which would have essentially strengthened the hand of banks and loan sharks and all of that as it relates to university fees. One of the biggest concerns that we have and have expressed is the fact that in the United States, and in the UK, the biggest financial debt is student debt. And the next global financial crisis may be as a result of student debt, because trillions of rands have been offered to students for them to go and study without any government support, and what governments only provided was some form of guarantees, which is what the Hare Commission had recommended should be done in this case. We do not believe that it is in the interest of the students, of the working class and the poor, that government only provides backing to loans provided to students. Already, many parents and many students are already indebted when they enter the labor market. Now, we do not want to compound that problem. And that's why the president said that in state, what we would do is that the state would provide resources and the state would ensure that it faces in free education over the next 5 years.
But what about our growth prospects? They're not looking too good. As a state, can we absorb such a cost? That becomes the argument by some.
I think that if we really are serious about investing into our future, we have to look at how we develop our human resource. And part of developing our human resource is to educate our children. And I think one of the things that both the president of the country and the newly elected president of the ANC continue to emphasize is that if we fix the education system, we will be able to sort out issues of growth and all of that. I always want to put it back to people who say, you know, where will we, I mean, is this not an extra cost, and all sorts of argument. And my point is, as long as we are doing this in order to invest into the current and future human resource of our country, therein lies the solution for our growth.
Now, is this not the competence of Treasury? Because in this whole conversation, to a certain degree, we've heard very little from Treasury. We've had higher education speak. Last week, we also heard state security. But then when it gets to the numbers, many people in private homes are saying, we're really not sure of the figures. How much is it going to cost us as society? So do we have the numbers? Is it the 12.5 billion that some are throwing around, or is it not? Or the 40 billion that was thrown a bit earlier? I
think you're right. And the guarantees that we have is that the president has made a policy statement. The role of the Department of Higher Education is to ensure that universities and TVET colleges are ready to implement that policy statement, which is what we're doing. The role of Treasury is to allocate resources towards that policy statement. And the Minister of Finance have consistently and continuously indicated that in his budget statement, he will indicate what the figures are, what the sources of those figures are, and all of that. And I must emphasize that this is not the first time. I mean, if you remember with the fees must fall, when the president entered into an agreement with students, vice chancellors, and everybody else, Treasury, working together with the different government departments, went out to find the resources that financed the freeze of a fee increase, and also found the resources for the student debt that was due to universities. So it's not the first time. And we are confident that there are resources that will be allocated to ensure that ultimately, over the next 5 years, we face in fee-free higher education.
Mr. Manamela, thank you very much for joining us. As you heard, at least please do use that catch system if you are one of those late appliers, to see if you can find space available, and you are sure there will be no violence, at least from high institutions.
Well, there will be no violence, and I think those whose intention is to instigate violence at universities and TVET colleges will be disappointed that there will be absolutely no chaos, no violence. We will start this academic year on time.
Thank you very much for your time.